Welcome back to the Five Elements podcast, everybody. Thank you once again for listening, and I appreciate y'all deeply. But there's one thing that I appreciate more than you, and that is today's sponsor. And I mean, I have really just been blessed with the amount of altruistic, incredible sponsors that have lunged at me to be a part of this experience, this program that really is an experience. And that is today's sponsor, which is union busting. And union busting is something that I think is one of the most underappreciated industries that we have in today's society. Because when you form a union, what you're really saying to your employer is, we don't trust you. And the thing about that, it makes me sick to my stomach, is that no corporation has ever not thought of you as family. Like, would you form a union against your family? No. So why would you form a union against your corporate governors and the shareholders? It's disgusting, and I won't stand for it. And this is why I'm in reverence that I could be aligned with something as beautiful as union busting. And every time a union forms, I cry a little bit inside. And if they truly form and if they negotiate for higher wages, I cry on the outside too. And not only me, shareholders, the one percenters, people with yachts, all of them suffer every time a union is formed. So with union busting, what a union buster will do is usually a consulting company. And we love consulting companies on this program. We think consultants do the most, and we have nothing bad to say about them. And when a union is formed, basically you look your boss straight in the eye and you spit in their face. And the only protection that they have are these consultants who will come in and they will use the best. They fight. A good guy with a gun can defeat a bad guy with a gun. And I believe that. I believe that a good guy with pro-capitalist information can defeat a socialist who just wants to have a living wage. And we don't stand for that here. So if you hear any rumblings of a union in your place of work, snitch. Snitch immediately. It is one of the most patriotic things you can do. And that is to rat on your comrades and colleagues who are living the same standard of living as you, so that you can kiss the boots of the higher ups. Because here's the thing, they're going to pick one of you. You know what I mean? Be that choice. Sell your soul. Because the thing about souls is that they're actually worth a lot of money in the marketplace. And if you can just simply go behind the back of everyone trying to form a union so that they can afford to feed their families, which is just the most selfish thing I could ever even fathom, you might be chosen by the higher ups, and therefore you can feed your family. And it's just something that I don't think enough people have thought about. And as someone who was raised in a family where, you know what, my mother was a part of a union. And what did it get her? Stable income. She bought her house. She owned her car. She retired with a good pension. You know what? All of these things were true, but what they really bred was a level of entitlement. The thing is, she felt entitled to live a life of dignity. And I think the union enabled her to have that. So, so if you could just only support union busting and accept that a pizza party, you know what, if you're struggling to feed your family, just take home food from the pizza party. Is it that hard? Oh my, I just cracked the code. So union busting is something that the Five Elements podcast truly supports. And if you support it, I support you. And you know what? If you want to kiss something, kiss the boots. Lick the boots, because they taste oh so good, because they taste like money, power, and influence. And with that out of the way, we're actually going to start today's episode. In today's episode, I'm going to have Alisa Bowman on. She is a writer, a science writer and content creator, also a ghostwriter for some books as well. She's an author. She's a very lovely woman, and she's a great writer. She writes for Precision Nutrition as well. She's written a ton of articles for them, and that's how I got connected with her. And she's more of a journalist and how she goes about it. She asks a lot of questions to people in the industry, experts, and tries to curate the best digestible answer for you so that you can actually understand the information you're taking in and how it's relevant to you. And that second part is really important because a lot of the times we'll just take in information and you know what information can be interesting and cool, but how relevant is it to your actual life? People like Alisa do great work in this where they are the mediators in between, you know what, the jargon that is going to be in the actual scientific journals and the experts and how they communicate, and the middle person who's going to then convey that information to everyday folks who are like, okay, cool, this does that, but what does that actually mean for me? And she asks great questions and she writes great articles. So in this podcast, I interviewed her on her experience of writing over 30 books, writing for Sports Illustrated, Precision Nutrition, Mayo Clinic. She's been all over the place. And I wanted to get an idea of kind of how she goes about her writing process and how she, and advice that she's going to have for you on how you can navigate the fitness and wellness industry with a little bit more skepticism so that you cannot fall for fads and understand what's actually relevant to you. So that's going to be on the other side of this. But now I'm going to start with how you can truly support the show, other than obviously shilling for the shareholders, which is really what the show is all about. In a real sense, you can leave a review and share the pod. That actually helps us tremendously. So always remember to leave a review and share the pod wherever you can if you find this show helpful. Next, you can subscribe to the newsletter. I'm trying to get a little more active on it again, but when you subscribe to the newsletter, you will receive a free 12-week program, and the program is going to come with a link that you can actually copy and fill it on your own. There's going to be YouTube links of me doing all the exercises of everything in that program. It's more of a beginner one, but it'll be very helpful for you if you don't know where to start with doing a new program to get back into the gym. And next, you're going to get a how to make your own meal plan PDF. It's an article I wrote a long time ago, and I turned it into a PDF so that if you know what, I could give you a meal plan. Well, I can't because I'm not registered to do that, but someone could give you a meal plan, but that doesn't really teach you much. I made the how to make your own meal plan PDF kind of under the idea of teach somebody to fish as opposed to give them a fish. So there's a lot of resources in there that can help you understand how much food you might need to eat depending on your goal, how you can actually understand how much that food is, protein, fat, carbohydrates, examples of those, and how to actually create your own meal plan with some flexibility so that you can continuously add to it and not be constrained over having to follow some rigid meal plan and not understand what even goes into that. So you'll get that when you sign up for the newsletter as well. And then whenever I try to release a bunch of new pods or a new article or I'm advertising something, and just I'm going to be getting back on the newsletter just to share some more fitness information with you. That's going to be on there. So you'll get a lot of free information and you'll get some free goodies with the program and the meal plan, how to make your own meal plan PDF as well. And lastly, you can sign up for online coaching. If you are looking for support with your fitness journey, if you were looking for a custom program, customized nutrition coaching, depending on what your goal is, it could be fat loss, it could be muscle building, it could be just trying to be healthier. My online coaching is something that will touch on that. Now, as I always say, if you are strictly looking for fat loss and it's the only thing you care about, you and I are probably not going to work together great. But if you have a fat loss goal that's centered around being overall healthier and improving your habits with nutrition and understanding of nutrition at the same time, you and I would be a great fit. And you can check out how to schedule a complimentary call to see if you and I would actually be a good fit working together with the link in the show notes. And that'll come with a complimentary call where we'll figure out if it's a good idea for us to work together or not. And you can learn more about that by going to the show notes of this episode. Now, we're going to touch on a little bit of roses and thorns before we get to the interview with Alisa. And easy rose today. And that rose is that the boy is going to India. I'm going home, going to Goa. My family, my dad's side of the family is from Goa, which is the smallest state in India. It's a very tiny place. It's a very interesting place. It was never colonized by the Brits. It was actually colonized by Portugal. So a very strange place in India, but very cool place. It's a big party spot. A lot of techno music comes out of there as well. Beautiful beaches. The food is delicious. And my family is heavily identified as being a part of the Goan community, which is interesting because none of them really live there. Most of them that are alive today grew up in Africa, in East Africa, in Uganda or Kenya. And that's where my dad was born and lived until I think he was 7 or 8. But the Goan community has always stayed really tight. And I talked about it a little bit in the last episode where my great uncle had passed. And he actually did live in Goa. he was one of the few that lived a long time in Goa, and he loved Goa. It was something that he always talked about. And when he finally got to bring family back there, he was super stoked on it. And he and my family spoke the best of the native tongue there, which is Konkani. And it's something that whenever I speak to my aunts, I try to address them in an idiom, which is just Dev Bodem Korom. It means God bless you. It's a great way to say hi. And as I've started learning Spanish, I realized the power of language. And I actually asked one of my aunties what a greeting I should say to them is on the phone. And it was that. And I remember um, the last memory I have with my great uncle before he passed was actually saying Dev Bodem Karum to him. So that was quite beautiful. But going back to Goa is something that everything in my family were told from the moment we're born. You got to go back to Goa. My great grandma, my nana is buried there. My papa, who I never met, he was also buried there as well. I think we have a family house there. Someone owns it, and I'm gonna go there. We got some cousins there, so I'm gonna visit that. I'm gonna go to also Punjab with two of my best friends who are from that area, and they speak the language too, and they're from there for most of their lives. So that's super exciting. I'm going to get a little more authentic experience where it's not just going to be the touristy stuff. I'm going to be hanging out with locals, and I've always wanted to experience India in a more diverse way than just going to the Taj, going to Bombay, going to Delhi, and going to the big spots. I want to get some of the authentic stuff too. So it's gonna be a mix of all that. I'm so excited. My siblings actually gonna come meet us there too. So I'm it's gonna be the trip of a lifetime for me because I'm going back to a place that I've strong cultural roots to, and that my family has strong cultural roots to. But also, Indian history has been something that I've been very fascinated with in the last few years. So to actually get to go is incredibly exciting for me, and go with people that I really love. I've never left North America, so this is a massive trip for me. This is the longest flight I'll ever be on. This is the longest trip I'll ever have been on. And you know what? This year has been a massive year of growth and getting out of my comfort zone. And you know what? I said I was going to do it, and I just booked it. I'm going with people that I figured out we can actually travel together because they could get the time off too. So that is an easy rose, and I am so excited about that. Now, when I was doing the show notes for this episode, I was writing it down, and a couple things popped up of just some thorns that have been hitting me in the side, and that is along the lines of time management, getting stuck, and forgetting the process. Now, I'm in a state of my life where I'm very excited about what I want to be working on. This podcast is something that I'm very excited about working on whenever I get to it. Writing articles for Precision Nutrition has been something that I was really excited about and still am. Um, I am really excited about spending more time with my family and loved ones. And I'm also really excited about my coaching practice. But there's only so much time in a day. And I'm also quite excited about learning Spanish. So there's only so much time in a day. And I have been overextending myself a little bit, but at the same time, fixating on all the things that I can't do. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but sometimes I'll just exhaust myself thinking about everything that I should do. And then I don't do anything. And that happens more often than I would like. So a state of mind that I've been trying to challenge myself to get into is just do one thing at a time and try to be as present as possible. And that is so hard, but it pays off quite well because after a week of it, I'm like, I did a few more things than I would have normally done. And that's not the most enticing, like, um, marketing strategy, I guess. Like, if someone said that to me, like, hey, I'm going to help you do a little bit more this week than you normally do and be a little less stressed. I don't know if I'm clicking that, but that's really what most of us need. We don't need radical transformations because those are really hard to achieve and take a ton of time. And if the time is the one thing we're short on, I don't know why we think that a time consuming massive project is going to be the thing that gets us out of the way. So I've been trying to make that gradual shift to just one small thing at a time. And even with case in point, recording this, I just finished recording with Alisa. And normally I push it and then I'll just randomly get a burst of energy and do it. And it'll sit on my mind for like a week of, dude, you got to record the intro. You got to record the intro. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I have some time. It doesn't need to be perfect because sometimes I feel like I need to be in the perfect state to start creating. And that's not true. Once I get into it, I'm cooking. I feel fine right now. Is this amazing content? I don't know. You tell me, but I feel pretty good. But there's that flinch that I got to get past to just kind of do the thing. And chunking it down has been quite helpful to me. Just focusing on one thing at a time and realizing that, what, if I'm scattered doing a bunch of things, I'll do them all poorly. If I'm focused doing one thing, I might do less overall, but I'll do way higher quality and feel quite um, confident in it. Fire trucks are here. City's been gnarly today. I actually biked by, if you know Toronto at all, one of our most horrible roads you could ever find yourselves on is the DVP. It's where dreams go to die. The traffic there is atrocious. And that thing was over flooded completely. There's a river beside it. And I was biking by home from the gym today and it was completely flooded, car stuck there. Hope everything's okay. But I come home as well, and the bridge right beside my condo completely flooded under too. So the rainstorm hit us quite bad today, and I assume that those fire trucks are for that. So that's my thorn for today. That's my rose. All good things. The boys going home. I got to work on my time management and being more present in the moment. And it's for being excited about life, and that's good. But sometimes you can get so excited you exhaust yourself. Don't do anything when you could just do one small thing and then feel guilty about it. I'm trying to get out of that state because I'm trying to not feel guilty about not doing everything. How about you just do one thing? I'm basically talking to myself right now. And that's going to be it before we get to today's episode. I'm going to get to the interview with Alisa Bowman, a science and content writer. She writes for Precision Nutrition. She writes for Sports Illustrated, Mayo Clinic, and she is an co-author of around over 30 books, I believe. And just a wonderful listen. Her and I talk about how to navigate science and fitness in a way that's not going to have you falling for the traps. And there's a lot of gems in there that you'll find helpful along your journey, especially if you can relate to falling for some of the fads throughout the years. I've fallen for a ton of them and I've talked about it. She's been more skeptical and has really refined her ears for this over the years of writing about it and investigating it and kind of seeing how the tides have changed. And it was a great interview that was really smooth. And if I'll see you on the other side, I don't know, I'm just rambling now. I'll see you on the other side. Cheers. Okay, Alisa, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yes, how are you doing today?
I'm well, although it is almost 100 degrees here. I can't go outside for very long without sweating.
So it's that hot out in Pennsylvania right now?
Well, I mean, I'm sure we've hit 100 before, but what's hot for Pennsylvania is that it's continued for almost 2 weeks. We don't usually have heat that lasts this long without breaking and
See,
without cooling down at night.
I actually love the heat like that. I'm
Yeah.
I'm weird about that. Like, I actually I like when the sun like hurts my skin when it's touching it, which
Oh, that's funny.
I'm not sure why I live in Canada. Doesn't make a
Yeah.
lot of sense because it's been like that here too.
hmm Yeah, yeah. It just to show that people aren't used to it here. I went for a walk last night around 7:30, 7:45, and it was about 91 degrees at that point. And one of my neighbors was like, "You better be careful. It's hot outside." And I'm like, "I'm not going very quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm okay."
It is funny when you're in a climate where that stuff doesn't happen. Because I remember
Yeah.
hearing stories when I was a kid of like one time it like snowed in Florida, or there was frost on the ground, and like the city that it happened in shut down. And as a
Yeah.
Canadian, and you as a Pennsylvanian, you're like, all right, like calm down. You can handle a little bit of snow, but we
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
handle the
Yeah.
heat like that.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So you
It's hard on the animals to some degree, but it's okay. We'll see fall at some point.
you got the doggos?
Yeah, I mean, because when it's this hot, it's the cement, like the street will burn their feet.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's yeah.
Actually, I was having that on the deck the other day, and I was like, man, this is gnarly. Like you gotta like wet the deck just to
hmm
walk on it. Um,
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get started talking about kind of your story because you've been in this game for quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
That's how we got connected because we both do some contract writing for Precision Nutrition, and anyone
hmm
listening would be familiar with them. But you're quite decorated, and you've written for PN quite a bit. The Mayo Clinic you seem to regularly contribute to.
hmm
I even saw Sports Illustrated on there, which is really cool. But then I also, and correct me if I'm wrong, I found that you co-authored 30 books or a little bit
Yeah.
more than 30 books.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been writing, and the range of your writing is
Yeah.
kind of wildly all over the place too. Like I figured it would just be more science stuff and health related, which that was the bulk
hmm
of it. But I also found some marriage work, some men's mental
hmm
health specifically, which was really interesting. And then I think one of the books I saw on Amazon that it seemed to be the highest rated one with the most amount of sales was the FBI profiling tactics one.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah. I've done.
damn.
It's just sort of how it all worked out. I've worked full time in many different capacities. I started as a newspaper reporter. I worked for a publishing house for a while, which is what led to the book work. I worked for a Runner's World magazine for a while, which led to magazine work afterwards, and then worked for Hearst as, I guess I was called a product developer. It was a very strange, like unusual job, but and then Precision Nutrition. So all of those led to different skills, but all of those skills involve words. And then my specialty is health and science, but because of the newspaper background, storytelling is a love of mine, and it's something that I also excel in. And somebody for the FBI profiler, when you know, at the time I wrote that book, there was a what was the TV show that had all the serial killers and the FBI profilers
Criminal
on it?
Minds.
It was, yes. So
Love that
that was
show.
like huge at the time, and I watched it like pretty religiously. Which I don't know what that says about me, but anyway,
Yo,
somebody
I
was like,
watch it
"Hey,"
all the time too.
yeah, someone was like, "Hey, we're thinking of doing a book with a profiler. Would you be like to be involved?" And I was like, "I am so fascinated. I'm in." And Mary Ellen O'Toole, the profiler that I wrote the book with, was just amazing. She had been a part of some of the biggest serial killer cases. And I don't know what she thought of me that I was so interested in all of that. I think it's just so different from the people that you see in a given day. Like psychopaths operate very differently, and I'm fascinated with anything that I don't know about, so I just wanted to know more.
Yeah, that's a true writer right there.
Yeah.
So, when did you write that book?
um, Gosh, I think that was probably the early 2010s. I don't remember
Okay.
exactly.
So you were
Yeah.
early to the obsessing over serial killer content game.
Yes.
You got in at the ground floor.
Absolutely. I mean, even at the time, I was like, I don't think we should put psychopath in the title because, I'm like one of the only people in the world that cares about that. And now I think if you had somebody who wanted to write a book about psychopaths, it would probably be an instant bestseller because everybody's calling each other psychopaths. It's just become a word that's in our language now.
Oh my, yeah, that's actually, I never thought about that because that happens with words where they really get watered down, where when they're
Mm-hmm.
introduced, they have this severity to them. And then once they're
Yeah.
used more colloquially, consistently, they lose that,
Mm-hmm.
they lose that intensity that comes with it. I feel like psychopath is definitely one of those. Like, I can't remember a
Mm-hmm.
time when it was a massive, like, word to be lodging at someone, but now it seems so casual because I was probably too young
Yeah.
when I wouldn't have been using words like that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but when you
Yeah.
wrote that one, it really felt like using that word would be a turnoff to the reader.
Yeah. Because there's like only like, I think it's like less than 1% of the population would test positive. You don't test positive, but I don't know what to call it. They
The
wouldn't test
rapid
high in
test, you put the thing
psychopathy,
in your
right? Yeah,
nose.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're
It's
a
not.
psychopath.
Yeah, like there's not that many of them out there, right? It's very. So I was like, well, who's going to really read about like what a psychopath is? But now people are fascinated by it, and I think maybe things that happened in the actual news too makes people curious about why would someone do um, why would someone murder children, for example, or do some of these horrible things. So um, I mean, it's good to wonder, but they are, from what I learned from Mary Ellen, very distinct individuals with no empathy and lots of narcissism.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. I mean, that's another word that's tossed
yeah.
around so casually now.
Hmm.
Like everyone's a
Yep, everybody's a
narcissist.
narcissist. Yeah,
Yeah.
we used to call people selfish. Now everybody's a narcissist. Yeah,
Yeah. We put a little bit of gasoline on every
yeah.
flamed word, every flammable word, and now everyone's just like the most extreme version of any bad thing that they might do. So that's interesting from your perspective that you had like kind of seen the graduation of some of these words and the
Hmm.
maturation of like the intense focus on psychopathy and like serial
Yeah.
killers. Like it's probably one of the most popular podcast topics, I would think.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. True crime in general has really taken off.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. I mean, people always liked thrillers that were fiction, and so now true crime is basically a thriller, but it's actually true, you know.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So you write mostly about fitness and health, correct?
Yes, that's
So
true. Hmm.
through what like kind of lens and context do you aim to communicate through your like fitness and health work?
Um, I think the most lately, what I try to do is dispel some of the black and white thinking that's out there. So, you know, lots of outlets will do this typical story of is blank bad for you, or what's the best blank to eat kind of story. And in blank, you could put anything in there. It could be like, what's the best vegetable to eat? What, or is xylitol bad for you? That story, people click on it. They want to know what not to eat, but it's not particularly helpful for people.
Mm.
And so I'm more interested in writing the story that can help consumers make real decisions that affect their life. And so, for example, let's take the debate about ultra processed foods. Like, I'm not here to tell anybody that they're a health food because they're not, but you're not going to meet that many people who have the willpower to not eat any ultra processed foods at all, right? So giving them a long list of ultra processed foods that are bad for them isn't particularly helpful. But what might be helpful is showing them how to make decisions or how to moderate their intake, how much unprocessed food can you eat so that maybe a little bit of ultra processed food isn't bad for you. Like, so those are the questions that I try to ask experts and look for in the research, so that when somebody reads a story that I write, they can make like a decision that affects their life for the better.
Yeah, because with what you're talking about, it almost feels really good in ironically very similar to consuming hyperpalatable processed foods.
Mm-hmm.
Feels very good for a moment to find that exact answer of, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's bad. I'm no longer, because I've done this
Mm-hmm.
where I'll say, you know what? No more ultra processed foods ever.
Yep.
And that feels really good for a short period of time because
Yeah.
I've obtained an illusion of control that I fantasize I'll continue forever. I'm 0
Mm-hmm.
for 1,000 at doing this, but every time I do it, it still feels really good in the beginning.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's actually analogous to eating ultra processed foods, like when you're using it strictly as a coping mechanism, because I've
All
done
right.
that too,
Yeah.
where it's like it feels really good in the moment. And I'm like, it won't be a problem, like whatever. And then I'm overeating. And then I've struggled with binge eating in the past, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
devolved into other behaviors. But it's very similar to that, where
Yeah.
it's hard to kind of find a balance because the balance isn't never eating it, right? It's like being able to manage it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you can almost get analysis by paralysis if you never make a decision with the information you're
Mm-hmm.
taking in too. Because
Exactly.
I've also been there with becoming more kind of like scientifically literate, but more critical is where you get to the point where you're like, well, then does anything even matter? Like you can kind of do anything, but you
Mm-hmm.
still need to have some sort of structure that you're following too.
Exactly. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, there are probably rare people who can give up every food that they find on the internet that has a story about it being bad. But I think they're rare. Like most people are going to want food that they like to eat, whether that's chips or cookies or cheese or bacon. Like I can go on listing all these ultra processed foods, but somewhere in there, most people are like, wait, I'm not giving that up. My life's not worth living
Yeah.
if I give that up. And so then it's like, okay, what can the story say that's actually helpful for them? Like if you really love bacon, and sure, it is like listed as comparable to cigarettes as a carcinogen, but if you have it once a month, what does that mean? Is that the equivalent of, I don't know the answer to this question, but is that the equivalent of smoking one cigarette a month? Or that's kind of information that I think would be really helpful for people to have.
Yeah, that's a good point because even as if it was as harmful as smoking one cigarette per month, which that's a different like tangent because being a
Mm-hmm.
carcinogen doesn't mean it's the
Yeah.
same severity of a carcinogen
Yeah.
depending on what it is. But if you did smoke once a month of cigarettes, like maybe a couple cigarettes, but you still did everything else well, like you'd be in a pretty solid spot still. Like because
Exactly.
I'm curious your perspective here because it seems like we've picked and chose. I don't know how to speak English apparently. Picked and chose, I don't know, whichever conjugation we want to use from those two words, like of which drugs and behaviors are okay in moderation. Like cigarettes, I understand why they've gotten like why they're
Mhm.
completely off limits for most people because they are really bad. But there was massive campaigns from most governments of like making you think that hey, these are really bad for you. But one that
Yeah.
I find interesting is alcohol because
Oh
like
yeah.
it's a literal poison. There is no
Yeah.
health benefits. I don't care what people talk about a glass of wine. It's the grapes, it's not the alcohol. Like, so there really isn't
Exactly.
anything good about it. But I like drinking. Most people I know like
Hmm.
it. And we do seem to accept the health tax on that. But
Yeah.
in some things we don't at all, like fast food. I've had clients
Oh
who are
gosh.
like,
Yeah.
I'll never eat McDonald's. It's disgusting. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you drink like 2 bottles of wine a week, like no judgment. But
Yeah.
like it is interesting where we pick and choose which ones are completely off limits and which ones are just like my body is a temple and this will never enter my
Yeah.
mouth.
Yeah. And I think some of that is because of how those foods or substances have been portrayed by the media in the past. So take chocolate, take wine. I'm sure I could come up with other examples, but in the past, the and I probably might have been written this story when I was younger, and I didn't have my whole like I'm trying to break out of the black and white thinking concept that I do now. But you know, we love to do the story of chocolate's good for you. Like we want to find the food that people like that's good for them because that's surprising, right? And so for years, people were told like, "Oh, red wine, it's good for your heart." And it's only like more recently where it became like, well, maybe it's not that good, and you know what, it's actually might cause breast cancer, and then it was like, wait a minute, it's actually a toxin. So uh, it doesn't mean like, there are some people, my husband loves his beer, and so that's not going to be the thing that he chooses to change in his life, but he also loves to exercise, so there's some offsets there, I think.
Yeah. So you mentioned when you were earlier in your career,
Yeah.
how did you transition to kind of fighting the black and white thinking when it comes to your writing and how you process and share information?
I think that comes from my time at Precision Nutrition, because I went through their certification, and then some of their concepts, like trying to eat a little bit better versus, you know, before then it was like either good versus bad. Your diet was either good versus bad, as opposed to, okay, here's my starting point. How do I get it a little bit better than where I am right now? And all of that continuum thinking, like, which is something that really resonates with me on many levels because it mirrors like harm reduction, and
Yeah,
which is a concept that I was really already familiar with, and I was like, why don't we do this with everything, because
love
it's
that.
doable for people, so I think precision nutrition is probably what changed me, although I was already sort of headed in that direction, and it was sort of like it gave me an answer or a way of thinking about nutrition and actually all of science that I was already looking for. I just didn't know it yet.
That's so funny what you were talking about there to me because you said something very
Yeah.
basic, but also revolutionary at the same time for a lot of people like myself and people like yourself
Mm-hmm.
who were trapped in that way of thinking was why don't we just try eating a little bit better? Where
Mm-hmm.
it made me think of because we have historically most people in the fitness industry and with health have such a toxic relationship with health and wellness, and
Yeah.
it mirrors when like you're in a really toxic relationship with a human, like your parents, could be a spouse, could be friends. When you're used to a really toxic relationship, the most basic human advice seems revolutionary, where it's like, why
Yeah.
don't you just communicate your needs? And it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
The first time I heard that, I was like, that's not allowed. Like that's
Yeah.
paradigm shifting behaviors. Like, oh, if you don't like that, you can tell them, hey, that's okay, but I'm not going to participate in that. It's like, no, I can't tell it to my
Yeah.
dad. It's like, no, you can. But when you're used to these
Mm-hmm.
types of relationships, they feel like it has to be, you have to do something extreme instead, right?
Yeah.
Like shut them out, like never speak to them
Mm-hmm.
again, or blow up back. Like you fight fire with
Mm-hmm.
fire. But with this context, with kind of changing our relationship with food, it's like, well, you know what? We were told we're in this really toxic relationship with food. And instead of just going the other route where it's like, well, now everything is off limits and this is bad and that causes
Yeah.
cancer and you're not allowed to do this and creating these rigid rules, it's as simple as, well, why don't we just try eating a little bit better as opposed to
Yep.
let's eat perfect all the time?
Exactly. Because eating perfect all the time for probably 99% of people isn't happening.
Yeah, that's why, like you said, harm reduction. It's very similar
Yeah.
with working with someone
Yeah.
who's struggling with addiction. It's like if you don't know any better, someone will say, "Well, just stop doing it." And I'm like, "Well, they're humans will never stop doing drugs."
Hmm. Exactly.
I don't know
Yeah.
what you think you're gonna do by getting us to say we're just stop doing it.
Yep.
It'll never happen. Like, but how
Right.
can we reduce
Right.
the harm for anyone who is going to do that?
Yeah, and I think that that works for anything that you want to do that falls into the self-improvement realm can be looked at that way. So maybe you feel like you're on your phone too much, and your first thought might be, "Well, I'm a bad person that I'm on my phone too much. What's wrong with me? I have no willpower. I'm addicted. I'm never going to be able to stop." Right? Like that's one way of thinking about it. But another might be, okay, I spent 4 hours on my phone today, and on average maybe next week I'll try to do 3 hours and
Hmm.
45 minutes on average, and you might cut it down that way, or you might say, okay, before I go on my phone, I'm going to do this one thing that's good for me. Maybe it's like take a walk around the house or something. And so you start to reduce the harm, but you haven't given it up. And I think most people aren't going to give up their phones anyway. I mean, mine's my flashlight and it's my calculator. Like, how could I give up my phone? I wouldn't, I'd be lost. I wouldn't be able to, I actually literally would
Wait,
be lost because I
wait,
wouldn't be able to
listen.
drive anywhere.
That's the two first things you think of with your phone is a flashlight and calculator.
Yeah. I don't know. I use my calculator a lot.
That's
Actually, I
awesome.
use the flash.
That's
Anyway,
like the
but
most
it,
wholesome way to think. Like, I need this thing. It's my flashlight and my calculator.
yeah. But they've become like it's the new Swiss Army knife, right? Your
Yeah.
smartphone does almost everything for you. Um, but yeah, like I think most people don't think about that. And even in our relationships, we think, oh, either this person's in my life or they're not in my life, right? That's the black and white.
Yeah.
But maybe it's like, okay, in what way? That's the third choice. In what way will I have this person in my life? And I'm not saying you have to keep people in your life, but it's just that it's another question, it's another option. Usually we think we only have two options, and there's a maybe consider, like, when you feel stuck between those two things and neither one of them feels good, be like, wait, is there a third option?
Yeah. That can be very eye opening for people because
Yeah.
it's that horseshoe theory of like on both extremes, you're kind of doing the same thing. And that can be
Hmm.
political or nutritional or whatever. Because I've seen people go from being vegan to carnivore. And I've
Yeah.
seen people who are like, I'm a carnivore to vegan. And I'm like, you kind of just did this. You're doing the same thing, just you're wearing a
Yeah.
different mask, essentially. Like
Yeah.
playing the same sport, you're just wearing a different jersey now. Like,
Yep. Yeah.
and there you haven't explored that third option because I don't know. Like to me, that third option doesn't you don't get that same dopamine response of the excitement of like, okay, here we
Yeah.
go.
Right. There's always the I found the thing,
Mm,
the thing that's going to change my life. It's going to give me energy. It's going to help me sleep. It's good, right? And maybe it does for a little while, because when you go on an extreme diet, then you're by definition not eating something that might have been making you feel bad. But although it's kind of hard for me to believe it feels good to only eat meat for many different reasons. Digestion leads the list. But anyway,
yeah, no, I mean, people rave about it. I've never done it.
yeah,
I can't imagine it feeling good either, to be honest. But
yeah,
some people say
yeah,
they really rave about it.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
curious with your experience. Did you come from a place of having a lot of black and white thinking about fitness and nutrition?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially I was just interested in it. I did track and field in high school, and so I think I always wanted to find a way to, run faster. And if you told me like eating broccoli would help me run faster when I was in high school, I probably would have been like, all right, fine, I'm eating broccoli. Or, and I probably back then would have tried any supplement or any extreme to do that. And so, it's really been more recently, especially with aging, being like, okay, I want to age better. I want to have a longer lifespan and health span. But what does that mean? I
Mm,
also want to have pleasure. I don't want to like not have pleasure in my life. So then you start looking at like, okay, there has to be a balance to this stuff. It's not all, only eating healthy foods, which actually doesn't even exist, right? Like,
Yeah.
because no matter what you delete from your diet or you say yourself, oh, okay, I can only have this, you will find something that could be a little bit better, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a continuum and you never get to 100. So,
So it's more recent that you've kind of like changed
yeah.
into from there, but it doesn't sound like it was too extreme for you at any point.
No, no. I mean, I'm not sure what you're defining as too extreme, but I mean, I was raised in the 70s where, Steakums and Elio's pizza was what we had in our freezer. And I don't know what we were served for school lunch, to be honest. But I do remember, I think that was when Reagan was president and they were trying to argue that ketchup was a vegetable.
They
So,
were
we
what? I didn't
weren't,
know they were arguing that ketchup
yeah,
was a vegetable.
yeah, in school lunches. Because they wanted it to count. It was kind of comical. But yeah, so I don't think like, nutrition back then wasn't like people hadn't really discovered it yet.
Mm,
And even exercise was just starting to be discovered. So I was doing like Richard Simmons or
yeah.
whatever was like the exercise of the day, but it wasn't like we didn't have the internet and we didn't have gurus. And so I was just doing stuff like going to the gym and taking an aerobics class or running track. But now it's so different because it's really confusing for people to go online and you have one person telling you that something is evil and terrible, and the medical industry is all bought out by, I don't know, whatever, big pharma or big ag or whatever you want to call it. And then you have someone else arguing the exact opposite viewpoint. And as a consumer, you're like, wait, which one's true? I don't know.
Yeah. So when you first started writing, were you writing for magazines, like physical print magazines, or no?
Well, I started at a newspaper, and then my third job was for Runner's World magazine.
Yeah.
And then I was freelance for a while, and I wrote for a variety of magazines, Prevention Magazine, Men's Health. There were some others too.
So you really saw the evolution of just an abundance of information where the readers would have been more confused. So I'm wondering, did you notice a change in readership feedback of more confusion? Like, I don't know if you ever had access to a lot of feedback
Mm,
before, because I don't know how it worked back
yeah.
then, but have you noticed in readership engaging with your work, just generally more confusion that you're kind of touching on?
Um, I think what I've noticed is an overall lack of trust. Like when I was at Runner's World and we would go to marathons and we would give a talk about like what to eat before your race, which is kind of silly that they're going to run a marathon the next day and they're listening to me talking about what to eat. And at that point, it's already too late for them. But, like, but they really trusted us. Like they wanted to run with us. They would, I mean, I would get like letters in the mail from people because people actually wrote letters back then. And you could feel how much people admired their magazine editors. And I think most magazines would have that similar relationship with their readers back then. I don't know that that exists anymore. I mean, I can't prove it because I'm no longer at a magazine, but I don't see people walking around sort of living the brand of a major media brand like they used to back before the internet really was a thing. And so now I think people are basically joining tribes of diets and
Mm,
fitness fads and things like that. So rather than joining the Runner's World tribe, and I'm not saying that there aren't people who are in that tribe, but they're like, oh, I'm keto or I'm whole food plant based. I'm this. I'm intermittent fasting. Like that's the tribe that they're joining, and they're usually following maybe a guru rather than like a magazine brand. It's just I think what people have decided to trust has changed, and I to when I look back on some of the things I wrote, I can admit that I think we as the media were part of the problem. Like I think we lost their trust by writing stories like red wine is good for you without really questioning it. Chocolate's good for you. I'm not saying you shouldn't eat chocolate, by the way. It's just like that was a big thing for a while, telling people that chocolate was good for
Yeah.
them.
No, I remember
Yeah.
that, right? Because
Yeah.
as a reader, you'd be like, "Oh, that's awesome," and then you would do it, and then maybe the
Yeah.
next month, maybe you would do it, and then you'd be like, "Well, this doesn't feel like it's good for me,"
Mm-hmm.
or then 2 months later, even the same media outlet might run a story saying chocolate causes cancer, and you're like, "Wow, I don't."
Mm-hmm.
It does feel like you're how some media outlets have done it was just obviously to get as much clicks and as tons of
Mm-hmm.
competition, and you're trying to keep your advertisement dollars up. Like there is a
Yeah.
sacrifice there that was made, not with everyone, but obviously with some institutions where it did breed a level of mistrust. But one thing I find also interesting is on the other side, then there was a market for people making their entire identity online, like never trust any sort of
Mm-hmm.
media, but they
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
themselves are a form of media. Like
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
someone who has a natural skepticism of like too much pharmacological intervention for everything, but I still am like Western medicine is great. Like, does that mean that every institution and every private company is doing good things? No. Like what the
Yeah.
Sacklers did with the OxyContin, like that is
Mm-hmm.
undeniably an atrocity.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the person who is making their money off of all of like saying don't trust big pharma at all, they're usually selling some sort of supplement that has almost no evidence behind it. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like,
Exactly.
it's not just this altruistic Jesus like character who's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll wander around and be poor and just give the good word. Like that person doesn't exist. It's someone basically like an Alex Jones type. Like he made all
Mm-hmm.
of his money off
Mm-hmm.
supplements and he made all of his money
Yeah.
off telling people not to trust the media, but in himself became a media outlet. And I don't think a lot of people realize he made most of his money off selling supplements.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day,
I
you got to
know.
make your money if you're an institution like that.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to realize that a profit is being made, because it's easy to forget. If you probably the best example I can give you is the diet book industry.
Mm.
Whenever a new diet comes out, and I mean like new diets come out every day, but I mean like the kind that hit the bestseller list and stay on there, there's almost a formula for it, and it'll be like, here's this magic ingredient, and you add this magic ingredient to your diet, you're going to lose weight. And you can go and look back through all the best selling diets and you can see this formula at play. And it's not about having a moderated diet or a well-rounded diet. It's about, like, you go back to the 60s with the grapefruit diet. That's a
Mm.
perfect example. Grapefruit was the magic ingredient. A little
I actually
more
remember that.
recently.
Like I was
Yeah,
not in
yeah,
the 60s, but I was around in the 60s, but like when I first started dieting when I was like 14, being on the internet, I remember the grapefruit diet. I'm like, I should be eating a lot of grapefruit. And I
yeah,
did lose a lot of weight, but it's like it's not
yeah.
because of the grapefruit specifically.
Exactly, exactly. I'm not saying grapefruit's not a bad food, but all of these diet, like one was about, okay, monounsaturated fats, do that and you're going to lose your belly fat. Or cayenne pepper was big. I'm sure there was a cayenne pepper diet. That was part of the master cleanse, right? And so they all had like these so-called magical ingredients. And I remember thinking at one point, I was like, you could make any diet, like I could make an avocado diet, and if you got the right, paired it with the right guru, it would be a bestseller. And it doesn't even matter because they're all calorie controlled. I think that's what people didn't understand.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say like any diet actual names, but I can just tell you that when you go on one of those meal plans, you're on a 1,400 calorie diet, and it does. And they might say, "Oh, you don't have to count calories as long as you eat your avocado every day, or as long as you do this."
Oh,
You're
okay.
on a calorie controlled diet when you follow that meal plan.
So those, as I assume you had to read a lot of books for your research and for writing, like,
Yeah.
so whenever you would find them, that do you actually do the math on the calories when you'd see the meal plans at the back?
I was the reason I know so much about this is I was usually like the ghostwriter on some of these books, and so I knew exactly what the mechanics were behind the scenes and how those diets
Wow,
worked. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
super interesting. Yeah. So what is a ghostwriter actually? I don't know if a lot of people know what a ghostwriter actually is.
Um, Usually you take somebody who has ideas or expertise. So I call that person the expert or the author. And that person is paired with someone like me, whose my expertise is words and typing things. And so I help them take their ideas and get them onto the computer screen. Sometimes authors just don't have writing skills, which makes sense. Like
Yeah.
if you got your PhD in the sciences, you might be able to write some things, but you might not be able to write a whole book. Um, and some people just don't have time. Like if you think of celebrities and how what they're doing, to promote themselves, they don't have time to really write a
Mm.
book. So a lot of times people like that will be paired with a writer or a team of writers to help them shape their project. And that's what a ghostwriter is.
So when I read Slash's autobiography, it was unlikely he typed everything for that book. He probably got interviewed.
I don't know. I can't say. I can't
Yeah.
say. I don't know for sure, but I would say most of the celebrity books you see out there, there was a writer involved somewhere. Like if you think of, this one is public, so I think I can say this for sure. Like Prince Harry's book was actually written by his last name's Mo Ringer. He wrote a bestseller. His own memoir was a bestseller, and so he's done a few celebrity books, but he's actually been on the cover. So nobody's
Okay.
trying to hide that from others. It's really obvious that he's the writer on the book.
That makes sense. So you ghost wrote on some books that did have the diet stuff in it.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's how you know about, okay, that's it. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
Yeah.
I realized I learned that term. I knew that term actually from hip hop.
Okay.
So
Which, oh,
like
the ghostwriter term?
yeah, so it'd be an
Okay.
insult where it was like, so Drake, he's obviously from Toronto,
Yeah.
and there was allegations like 10 years ago that he actually had a ghostwriter on all of his songs. And like for some pop
Oh.
music, everyone knows it, but certain types
Mm-hmm.
of music, like it's sacred that you write your own lyrics, and rap and hip hop is one where like you never want to
Mm.
be caught doing it. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
but then I actually heard it, so I only knew it as an insult like when I
Yeah.
first heard it. And
Yeah.
then I saw someone that I liked online that I looked up to their work and they're a writer and they're like, yeah, I'm a ghostwriter. And I was like, wait, why are you snitching on yourself, dude? Like I didn't realize it was an actual thing. And then I did learn over time, like, oh, okay, that does make sense. Cause I'm not sure
Yeah.
Britney Spears wrote her book. She might have wrote parts of it,
Yeah.
or like just to name anyone who's coming out with a massive, pretty well
Mm-hmm.
written book and they've never written anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's kind of like when you realize Santa Claus isn't real. You're like, oh yeah, how could he get to everyone's house in the same night?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like it's interesting because some parts of like comedians are actually very upfront that they have joke writers, for example. Like the
Yes.
I think everybody knows the Tonight Show has joke writers, like, but in the book industry, for some reason, the idea of a writer being paired with somebody to help them get their ideas together in a way that people can that they and resonate with them, it's a little more behind the scenes, but maybe not so much now as it used to be.
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. We pick and choose which vices
Yeah.
are okay and not okay. Because, like, a great example you brought up was comedians. Like, I really like the show Last Week Tonight with John Oliver,
Mm-hmm.
and he every episode he mentions his writers.
Yep.
I never
Yeah.
think of him as less funny because he has writers.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, like the transparency, you get over it so quickly. Like, there's not this purity of
Yeah.
like, well, I only like comics who write all of their jokes and never get any help. But with writing books, there
Mm-hmm.
is like maybe that's changing now. But the first time I heard that, I was
Yeah.
like, wait, what? They didn't write every word of this book? Like it's a
Yeah.
sham. I don't trust it anymore.
Yeah. But do you think like what's somebody good at? They're good at acting, or they're good at science, or they're good at math, or whatever their actual career is. Um, Even if they have writing skills, like to write a book, that's a very specific skill
Mm,
set. And I even find that other freelance writers I know struggle to write a book. Like it's not the same thing as writing a short form article.
yeah,
And it's weird. I was always like a endurance person with sport, and I'm an endurance person for the most part with writing as well. Like at long form, just kind of comes easily to me. So
that makes sense. And I'm a sprinter.
yeah,
I played football and I love a
yeah,
shorter article.
yeah. There you go. See,
Yeah.
there's there. Someone should do a study on this.
Yeah, they really should. Okay, so I actually want to ask a question now because
Okay.
I told you everyone that comes on, it's like one question and like 40 minutes goes by.
Yep.
Okay, so since you write articles regarding like newest fads in fitness and health, like what commonalities do you tend to see amongst the quote unquote latest fads?
Among the fads, well, there's that black and white thinking. This is good and everything else is bad. That is probably like the biggest part of a fad that I've seen. But also like this when I fads usually start because somebody's pushing them, and the people pushing them are usually talking in absolutes. Like they'll they'll say that something's proven or absolutely true, whereas if you listen to a true scientist talk, there's all
Mm.
these qualifiers. And I think it's great because more scientists now are on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook sharing their work than ever, but they don't say like this proves that grapes will do this. They usually say like something like, well, based on what I found in my study, this increases the likelihood that eating this may lower your risk of whatever disease. Like it sounds boring, right?
Yes.
Um, but gurus don't talk like that, and fads are not delivered like that. They're delivered like they're exciting and true, and everything else is wrong. And so when I encounter people where they're kind of like demonizing something, and they're trying to make something sound like it's the only truth out there, I see red flags all over the place, and I'm not saying that they are lying, but I'm saying that I start asking questions.
Yeah, that actually leads perfectly into like kind of the next question was like
Yeah.
if someone keeps falling for the latest fad, like what advice do you give to those people to protect them against falling for these and just basically becoming less vulnerable towards these fads and absolutes?
I think it's mostly a matter of asking curious questions. So, like when you start to get excited about something, think, well, how do I know this is true? What
Mm,
if this isn't true? What is the evidence in favor of this? What is the evidence against it? And once you might not like if you're not somebody who knows how to look at research, those questions might be hard to answer. But one thing you could do is say, okay, is there anybody out there that's saying the opposite, and actually challenge your bias that way by reading the opposite opinion. So let's say you're following somebody on social media and they're telling you that seed oils are terrible. And then be like, okay, can I find somebody who's saying the opposite of that? And then you start to weigh the evidence against, both viewpoints against each other.
yeah. Because what that made me think of was if you're in the pattern of going from fad to fad, it actually is like the similar pattern of going from relationship to relationship or fling to fling.
Yeah.
Those initial infatuation feelings are very similar and they
Hmm.
come on real strong and they burn real hard. And I actually
Yeah.
find that it's probably similar with diets. And I don't, for myself, it definitely has been where I am so excited about a new diet. Like when I used to fall for these quite a bit. And it's one of those things where I won't shut the hell up about it, which is
Yeah.
very similar if you've ever had a friend or yourself when you start dating someone new and like you just won't shut the hell up. You're like, man, and they do
Hmm.
this and they do that and they're perfect like this. And
Yes.
everyone's like, dude, I
Yep.
don't care, man. It's been 2 weeks. Like it's that same
Yep.
feeling. And I remember when I had to like kind of work on some of those feelings was like, that's actually my one of my good friends used this analogy. Is like sometimes you'll confuse the red flags for roses.
Yeah.
And it's exactly like that with falling for the newest fad. It feels so
Mm.
good, especially if you have a pattern of falling for it. Just like
Yep.
that person who hits all the wrong nerves, but like it feels so good. You're like, this person, this feels almost too good immediately. It's gonna end up in flames on that. So it
Hmm.
doesn't mean you can't hang out with that person or you can't try the diet,
Yeah.
but you need to have that skepticism of like, I've been here before. Let's not dive right into this.
Yeah. It's exactly. I also I think one of the other things that fads do is they put all the blame on the person following the fad and none of the blame on the fad itself. So
Mhm.
they'll say, "Oh, if you haven't lost weight on this diet, that means you're not trying hard enough,"
Yeah.
for example. Or, somehow the blame is on the dieter or the person, and it's never on the fad, even though most of the people trying the fad aren't able to stick to it. Wait a minute, who's the problem there?
It's a real great business model. Like you
Mm-hmm.
privatize the profits of like, oh, everything that
Yeah.
you when you succeed, it's because of me. And then you like socialize the losses. Like when
Mm-hmm.
you fail, it's because of you. And it's
Yep.
incredibly effective because it creates a survivorship bias, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
everyone who succeeds, those are the people that rise to the top and they're the ones spreading the message. But then the people who don't succeed on it, if they believe what they're told, they're like, well, that diet, it's not that it didn't work. It's just I didn't do it hard enough. And I've seen that
Mm-hmm.
especially with some specific diets, like keto, I've seen it with probably the
Oh
most.
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
not because keto is particularly like the worst one, but because you have to enter a state of ketosis
Mm,
and you can
yeah.
measure it. And it's so hard not to lose weight if you enter that state and you're
Mm-hmm.
truly eating keto because it's just hard it's hard to overeat
Yeah.
that bland of a diet, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then people are like, well, when I did it, it worked. And then I just couldn't do it anymore. And then they fall out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like this romanticization of getting back to that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. They have those sticks. Like they have like the
Yeah.
keto sticks were like, when I was seeing this tangible thing, the scale was going down. It's like, yeah, of course you weren't eating much, but like
Yeah.
you do that kind of through it with any diet with that level of restriction, right?
Right, right, exactly. And being able to stick to something is a measure. Like I
Yeah.
think especially in diets, we own for whatever reason, we're only using the scale as our measure. But and so we're like, oh, I'm not losing weight, but that's only one measure. Another one might be, can I stick to this? And if I keep like not sticking to it, what is that telling me? And it's not telling you that you're a bad person,
Yeah.
because I think that's what people think. There's all this morality, this self blame that's involved, and that's just not true. It just means that the diet is so extreme that most people probably can't follow it, or it's not the right diet for you.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I've done that too, where I've
Yeah.
moralized my ability to stay consistent on something. Where it's like,
Yep.
well, if I was a good person, I would do that. And it's like, why are we throwing moral
Mm-hmm.
labels on these? It's like I either could do it or I couldn't. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, yeah. And if you think of like how humans evolved, like we evolved to eat for a reason because it helped us survive. So if anything, not being able to stick to a diet means that you evolved to be pretty strong,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 100%.
Like you're not going to be the person who dies in a famine because of how your the signals that your body's giving you. That's actually a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. So I just think the way that people have learned to think about themselves is and the self-talk, and it's not coming from them, it's coming from the whole industry, is it's wrong and it's harmful.
Well, the industry does make a lot of money off of it, right? And like,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, I'll be honest, I've made money off of it, especially when I was younger. I didn't really
Yeah.
know what I was doing. And it
Hmm.
is this thing where you sit there like, dude, I could make way more money if I leveraged it.
Yeah.
Like, I actually
Hmm.
remember
Hmm.
it's interesting because I've been a trainer for like almost 11 years now. And when I first started, it was almost like we weren't aware of how harmful the stuff we were saying was. So we were just openly saying it.
Hmm.
Like it's if
Yeah.
you ever read like some historical journal entries from like people in like the 1800s, and you're like, whoa,
Hmm.
they just said that out loud. Like
Yeah.
that's the most
Yeah.
racist thing you've ever heard. But they're
Oh, right, right. Oh, yeah,
not
yeah.
even in like a judgmental way. They're saying it as if it's a matter of fact. And
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
whoa,
Yeah.
it's so interesting from this perspective now to be like, wow, someone might still think that, but they would have all these dog whistle words to hide it. So it's always
Yeah.
interesting to see the original sources. We were almost like that with selling personal training when I first got into the industry like 12, 11 years
Mm,
ago, where it was like, find their pain point and leverage it. Like my bosses
mm,
would say that to it. It's like, hey, use,
yeah.
oh, they don't want to be fat. Okay. I remember I had a client, like a boss tell me like, hey, like remind them every step of the way. Like if they don't do this, if they don't sign up for this package, they're gonna
Oh
stay.
gosh.
And it's like, and I was doing it and I didn't think twice about
Hmm.
it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not that long ago that
No,
one of the
no.
worst things I ever did was, and I thought I was in the right here, which makes it so much more like cringe, is I told the client, I was like, she had lost like 60 pounds working with me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what I want you to do now is I want you to take the worst picture of you that you used to have and make it as your background of your phone so that every time
Oh
you
gosh.
see your phone, it'll be a reminder like never go back to that, which is actually so
Yeah.
atrocious. And the
Yep.
funny thing, Alyssa, I thought I was cooking up I was like, this is a foolproof strategy. Like I struck
Yeah.
gold here. Like I've
Yeah.
said repeatedly, I'm so glad I didn't have a platform when I was first got in
Yeah.
this industry. I feel very bad for 20-year-old trainers who now have
Yeah.
social media and they
Yeah.
feel pressured to use it. I'm like, if I was airing out any of my thoughts and internalized beliefs when I was 18 to 20, my God,
Oh gosh.
I was doing
Yeah.
harm boots on the ground to all my clients, but I
Yeah.
could have been spreading that. And I had so much conviction in what I was saying that I maybe would have
Yeah.
actually cultivated a following because I had like the
Yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
arrogance that really
Yep.
cultivates people being like, oh, you know what you're talking. I had guru energy for sure.
Yeah. No, I think I can look back on my life and find things that I'm not proud of too, and I think that's a sign of growth. Like, let's like the fact that you can even talk about this, and be honest about it is a sign of growth. And we all grow, hopefully. Like, none of us want to be exactly the same at 30, 40, 50, or 60 as we were when we were 18. So I'm going to give you kudos for being able to look back and see that, one, that you did that, but also that you're no longer like that. That's great.
Oh, thank you, Alyssa. No, it's something that I
Yeah.
think about quite a bit now because I'm like, damn, because I'm very conscious of what I say on the internet now, as where back then
Yeah.
I was just saying anything. Like that's actually how I got into being more, I guess, critical was I make content that I wish my 20-year-old self consumed,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
It's the main
Exactly.
driver of a lot of the messaging that I put out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like it's about like how do you really help somebody? Um, and when I'm in a class with I'm middle aged now, and like everybody in my weightlifting class happens to be middle aged. I don't know, we just keep attracting that age person to that class. But does everybody in that class want to lose weight? Probably, but that's not necessarily why they're coming to the class. And
Yeah.
I think like when trainers realize that there's other ways to leverage pain points. I don't know. Are we all coming because we like being around each other? Or because we like how it feels to be strong? Those are maybe on social media that doesn't make your post go viral, but if you're training in a gym, I think those are things that keep people coming back for sure.
100%. Because
Yeah.
any personal trainer who's at a business for long enough will tell you most people don't lose weight.
Yeah.
Straight up. Like, no one likes this message because it's really bad marketing. But I've
Yeah.
been a trainer for 10 years. I've worked in gyms, I've worked around people. The average client does not lose a significant amount of weight and keep it off. There's very few transformations, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But people will continue working out with either a coach or a trainer or just at a gym or going to F45 or whatever. You know what? Because they're like, I feel better when I do this. And
Hmm.
I like the community of the gym. I have clients who I've worked with for like 7 years. They're like family, like straight up, like
Yeah.
we still obviously work out hard and we have goals that we're working towards. But there is this level of like, if you weren't here, I just wouldn't come. And you know me and I know
Hmm.
you. And this is super easy. And there's a level of connection because at the end of the day, humans always
Yeah,
want connection. And it's funny
exactly.
because I think actually more people think they need to have a weight loss goal because it's changing now. But back in the day, it was like
Hmm.
so people were like, well, I don't know, I just want to lose weight. And it's like, why? It's like, I don't know, I'm a little bit overweight. And then you really press, and some people really want it, of course. But then some people are like,
Yeah.
I thought I had to have a goal. Or they'll say, I should build muscle. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm not even sure everyone really wants to change their body drastically. Like
Yeah.
most people may want to change a little bit, or like they have a dream of looking
Hmm.
a certain way, but they've really thought about it. And
Yeah.
they're like, I'm not going to do what it takes. I just want to be a little bit healthier. Like that person exists too. And
Hmm.
I've worked with people like that for like 8 years. And they're like,
Yep.
maybe they lost 5 pounds and gained 5, 6 pounds of muscle, and they're way stronger and their joints don't hurt as much anymore. Not that they never hurt, right? But they don't hurt as much anymore. They
Yeah.
just feel generally better. And they're like, okay, this is cool. But to your point, that's a really hard marketing post to make. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I think like so precision nutrition has that five whys exercise that gets people, they keep asking why they want to do something, why do you want to do it until they get to the real reason. And I think like when you're looking at pain points in marketing, if you can get to a different real reason that is truly motivating for somebody. And so sure, some people want to lose weight, but why? And you
yeah.
keep asking why. Like for example, I wouldn't mind losing a few pounds because I know it's going to help me manage my blood cholesterol without going on medication, for example. Um, that's a real why, right? Like, and that's a motivating why for me. Whereas just losing weight is like a society's telling me I should do that, but I don't really feel the need. You know what I mean? Like that's not that motivating. But or like think of how motivated someone is when they really get into weightlifting and they start realizing that they can deadlift or
Oh
squat
yeah.
more weight, right? And you're
Oh
like, oh,
yeah.
now I want to do more weight. And that's like amazing, right? And that's way more motivating than just continually weighing yourself every morning to see if the number changed. You're like changing, like you're getting stronger, and you're able to like really do something about it by each, like it goes together. Like you go to the gym, you work out, you get stronger, and it makes sense, you know?
Yeah. Then that is really motivating. And it's actually leveraging a similar thing that I think weight loss has an inherent advantage of for just human brains. We'd love to see numbers change in the way we want
Yeah,
them to change. So if the scale goes down, there is that gamification that does make it exciting. But there's also on the
yeah,
reverse side, when the numbers in the gym go up, it's also really exciting because
yeah.
I've had a lot of clients in the past be like, I really want to lose weight, but then for whatever reason, with their nutrition, with their ability to stick to it, with their stress management, yada, 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 it was really hard to do that. And the thing that kept them exercising and kept them working hard in the gym is they get positive feedback of, oh, I can do this faster now. I can lift this weight more.
Hmm.
Because as I said before, if anyone who's gone to gym for a long time, you'll see most people in there don't go through massive transformations, but they are happy as hell at the gym. Like
Yeah,
that is really
exactly.
common to see, right? I
Yeah,
went through a transformation when I was like 14. I lost like 60 pounds. This was how I got
yeah,
into diet culture. I was like 13
yeah,
doing everything you never should have done. But then I got into weightlifting, and basically like I have a pretty muscular build now, but I basically built 90% of the muscle I have between age, I want to say 14 and 18.
yeah,
Like by the time I graduated high school, I had most of the muscle on my frame. No, maybe my first year as a trainer too. Within that span, so I built most of the muscle I have on my frame today, still 10 years ago, and I
yeah,
still like to go to the gym. Like, and there'll be sometimes where I'm like, I might lose a little bit of muscle because I can't train as much, and I basically just gain that muscle back. And then
yeah.
people are like, "Wow, dude, you put on some muscle." I'm like, "No, I kind of just got back some of the muscle I lost because 3 months of stress or something happened, and I didn't train as much." Like, but I
Yeah.
still get excited to go. And I'm probably never going to go through a serious transformation again because the amount of work it takes to go through a
Oh, right. Yeah.
like when I lost and built all that muscle, like it was consuming my life for so long. And I have decent genetics for building muscle too, which has to be talked about because I've trained clients
Yeah.
who they just don't. And they train way
Yeah.
harder than I ever have. And they
Yeah.
didn't build as much muscle. And that's okay. They feel better for that. But like
Yeah.
that is a truth of it where I'm not going to go through another trend, but I'm going to work out for the rest of my life.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. And as you get older, I think your views start to change. Like I'm taking care of, I'll say, aging people in my life who are starting to lose their freedoms because they didn't strength train. And so they're having trouble walking. And if you think about like what gives you freedom in life, the ability to stand up and sit down is huge. And if you can't do that by yourself, then you're going to need help going to the bathroom.
A hundred
And
percent.
so whenever we're doing squats in the class that I mentioned before, I'm always like, yep, this is how I'm going to go to the bathroom when I'm 95 and I'm not going to need help.
Yeah.
And I find that like motivating because I have watched people in their 80s and 90s lose their freedom and need to have someone help them, and they do not like it.
Yeah, no, I actually use that example with a lot of clients that are older where I'm like,
Yeah,
listen, because I have older family members too, and I've been around people where they've lost
yeah,
that freedom, and it does change your perspective quite a bit. Where you're like,
mm-hmm.
hey, a
Yeah,
squat used to be, I mean, maybe when you're like in your 20s, you're like, these are gonna build the sickest butt, and I'm gonna have the nice
mm-hmm.
butt, and then as you get older, you're like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna be able to pee without anyone having to watch and hold me the whole time. Like
yep,
same
exactly.
exercise, right? You're doing the exact same exercise, but the motivations of it change quite a bit just from that.
It, for sure, exactly.
Okay, so I think you have to leave soon, right? Because it's been about an hour. But
Yeah,
the last question I want to ask is um about your writing as well, because we covered a lot of just kind
okay.
of helpful information I think that people will really value and trying to get a better understanding of how to find good information and be more skeptical and really explore that third option of like, hey, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be one extreme or the other. But from a personal level for you, because you've written a lot of types of books, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the dream book that you eventually want to slash will write?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a dream book picked out. I will say that what I tell myself for my career now is that I want to work with people that I like. So let's just say they have a pleasant personality, or they're not a passive aggressive person. Put another way, um, who have an idea worth spreading. So I love science. And I'm always, I think my favorite books are when I'm paired with a scientist. Um, and then like on a project that can actually truly benefit people. So when those, and obviously I need to get paid, but I don't know. I guess I should have said that too. But when all of those boxes get checked, like I'm happy. Like I can see exactly what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I show up like at my computer and I can't wait to get started. So it's not like it has to be a specific topic. I don't know that I love any one topic over another topic as much as like I'm really interested to learn from the experts that I get paired with. And so that's why, I'm kind of geeky and into science. And so I love when I get to interview scientists about their findings and what it means for, the average person.
Okay. That's like a really archetypal journalist where you're like, I just want to like get closer to the truth in a way that can
Yep,
help
exactly.
people. As long as like it sounds like the big dream projects would be in the science field though.
Yeah, I mean, although when you mentioned like the book that I did with the FBI profiler, I would consider that a science book. I don't know if most people would, but
Psychology.
yeah, like she was sharing her life expertise with me. Um, I like working with people on their memoirs too. Like, so it's not like it's only science books, but um, I do really enjoy like learning from people who know about something about a topic that I know nothing about. It's just incredibly interesting to me.
Okay, perfect. That's really cool. I was curious if there was like ever a dream one. Because
Yeah,
I know like every writer has like things that they always want to work on, right? And you've written tons of books already. But
yeah.
so people can find your books on Amazon, right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
They can just type my name in, and pretty much everything will come up, except for the ghost written ones. But I probably can't talk about those anyway. So,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
Is there a book that you've written that would be the most similar to kind of the conversation we had today about helping people think about science and fitness
Oh,
and health in like a little bit more of like a dynamic way where it's not just black and white thinking?
I don't know if I worry that some author I've worked with is going to be like, say this book, and I'm not thinking of it right now. But but I do think like that's what Precision Nutrition's
Yeah,
blog is. Like they have several articles on there about like how to understand studies. Even like not just me, like I think if you're really interested in learning how to understand research, like examine.com is another great
love
company
examines.
to follow. And also just like try to follow like college professors and scientists who are doing published peer-reviewed research on the socials, because they explain their research, and then you can comment, and sometimes they answer your comments. Like Stu Phillips is great from McMaster
I love Stu
University.
Phillips. Yeah, yeah, he's
Yeah,
great.
like he publishes a lot, so he's releasing a lot of research. But there's many others. Like his name just sort of bubbled to the top of my brain. But um yeah, I don't know that I've written a book about like how to understand science. Maybe that should be my next book. I don't
Ooh,
know, but
maybe, yeah,
yeah.
maybe we came up with a little idea here.
Yeah,
Okay, perfect. So I'll share some of your articles on PN. I've read some of them. They're great because
yeah.
they're very journalistic, where you're trying to find an answer. Like, you
Mhm.
don't come with this bias of like, you're really just asking questions. And I got that
Yeah.
out. And there's inherent curiosity that I really enjoyed
Yes.
with the articles that you written on there. So I'll share your LinkedIn below because you share a lot of your content on there. And then I'm also going to share in the show notes your precision nutrition page, where all your
Okay.
articles that you wrote for them. So anyone, give them a read of anyone who's listening to this podcast, because if you enjoyed the way that like Alisa and I talked about kind of coming to a more grounded understanding of science and how to apply it to your fitness, like, her articles are fantastic on precision nutrition for that. And I got a few articles on there as well. So that's a website that we highly suggest on there. And I think that'll be everything for today. If you have anything else you want to say before we hop off.
No, no, that's great. I enjoyed talking with you, and thanks for including me on the podcast.
Of course, thank you for coming on. Once again, thank you for listening to the 5 Elements podcast. That was with Alisa Bowman. I'm going to put all of her information in the show notes below. Again, you can support the show by leaving a review and sharing the podcast with whoever you think will like this. If you sign up for the newsletter, you will get the 12-week free program and the How to Make Your Own Meal Plan PDF. And if you want to work with me with online coaching, custom programs delivered to you, support and nutrition coaching as well, you can look at what I offer with online coaching, and that will be in the show notes of this episode. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.